Today is Monday, December the 20th. It's 5:02. Calling the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation to order. Do we have any public comments, Angela? Okay, thank you. We're going to start off, first of all, going into executive session. 4.1, the Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. 1, Section 551.072, deliberation regarding the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, 921 Main Street. And number 2, Section 551.074, personnel matters, discussion on Chief Executive Officer position. Time is 5:03. Okay, we're reconvening from executive session, and it is 5:34. Going into regular business and presentations, 3.1, presentation, discussion, review of the offers of the building of 921 Main Street, including possible action by the BEDC Board to approve a real estate contract. At this time, we're going to authorize the Executive Director to work on the contract and move the process forward on 921 Main. Do we need a motion on that? I don't believe. Yeah. Do I have a motion?
Yeah. I'll, sorry, just went blank. Yeah, I move that we go ahead and authorize them to work with that contract.
Second. If you think that's a little more clear.
Sorry, go ahead. Why don't you do it? Yeah.
Director.
Yeah, a motion to approve authorize the director to go ahead and, or the secretary to work with the current contract that we have.
Contingent on review by the attorney?
Okay, yes, contingent upon review by the attorney.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, 3.2, BEDC Secretary and Treasurer Report. We do not have financials this month. This was really actually going to be a holiday month, and we really just had some items that we needed to go over, so we didn't press Tracy to provide the financials for December. But Bill, in his new role, has a treasurer's report.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity in my new role as treasurer to work more with the staff, particularly with Angela, and started to go through and take a look at what my role is and what resources we have and what we actually do. And so having gone through that, we had the new fiscal year that started, so we really have not quite 3 months worth of data and transactions in this fiscal year. And I've gone through briefly with the office and spent a little more time on data afterwards looking at transactions. And out of that, it's, from my knowledge, there's a few more questions that I have, and Angela's been able to arrange a meeting with Tracy And so Angela and and Tracy will meet with, on Wednesday of next week to go through the details of the systems and how it's working. Having gone through it, we've seen some things that are, check voided, things back and forth on the same accounts. Looks like a type of accrual, those type of things that I've seen. But one of the things that did stand out was that the Main Street project account line has been withdrawn 3 transactions once a month for the last 3 months. And at this point, I wasn't sure, Angela, do we have a contract with the city, the agreement executed?
No, sir.
Okay, so we don't have an agreement with the city on the Main Street project. I think it was a few months ago we actually proposed that and sent that in.
Well, we did. We have to. We can't just move money from one account to the other. So we put the agreement together. The city did not do that, so we put that together. You have to explain where the money's going, what it's going to be used for. Does it meet up with what's allowed under our statutes? Serves as a great audit trail. So,
But we don't have that signed and back.
well, I don't know. We never got it signed?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
So maybe there's just confusion or miscommunication
okay.
in regards, maybe you could talk to Tracy
I'll
about
talk with
that?
Tracy, because part of that agreement was that the deductions would occur on a monthly basis and the submissions of receipts and so forth, according to the agreement that we had concluded here. But the fact that the office doesn't have it signed means we don't have the documentation. And the fact that the transactions have occurred, we'll follow up and see whether they need to be reversed until the contracts are signed or the agreement is signed, and then follow the regulations of the agreement, which is on a quarterly basis, not on a monthly. So it may be leftover activities, just the way they used to do it, but the agreement that was prior fiscal year had already ended. So really, if we don't have a signed agreement, then there is no agreement and the transaction shouldn't happen. So, okay. So we'll follow up with Tracy on that, and then hopefully we can follow up and see whether we have a signed agreement on behalf of the city with the BEDC for the Main Street program project support.
Okay, speaking of agreements, we did have another agreement where we came behind the city council when they voted on the broadband. Who was that contract with?
We have a signed agreement between
Oh.
us and the city on the broadband agreement.
Okay.
We did receive that.
Okay, so that one was signed, but the Main Street was not. Okay. All right. Any questions about that?
Okay,
right.
thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, great. All right, 3.3, discussion and possible action on a change order from Doucette and Associates for the zoning concept scheme for the undeveloped portion of the Bastrop Business and Industrial Park in the amount of $6,600 and update on the zoning concept scheme. So, Ms. Young, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. On 10/18/2021, the board approved Doucette and Associates to prepare a zoning concept scheme in the amount of $10,000 or not to exceed $10,000. Our initial invoice that we received was for $6,700, which we processed. And then there was additional work required on the zoning concept scheme, and that cost came back to us at $9,900, bringing the total amount due to $16,600. The additional amount that we are asking you to approve is $6,600. What was included in that additional work was a site drainage plan and pond conceptual design, which totaled $6,400, a site pedestrian shed for $1,200, and a site thoroughfare plan for $2,300.
Just for my knowledge, what is a site pedestrian shed in terms of, I mean, is it a hut? What is it? I'm not familiar with it. I know it's in
I don't think it's actually a structure.
That is correct. It is not a structure. It's the physical aspect of pedestrians being on the property and leaving the property.
Oh, okay.
Or coming back onto the property.
So it's like a watershed,
Yeah.
Right.
I got you. Thank you.
That's
a
a great way to put it,
pedestrian
yeah.
shed.
So what was this kind of came to us in stages, and there was one after everything had been submitted, which pushed the amount over 10,000, which had to do with a pond design. Can you explain to me a pond design that's done before you ever even know where the buildings are going? I'm assuming you turn around and do a pond design when you know where the buildings are going. That was the additional request, correct?
Well,
I mean, we do
yes.
have some drawings in the packet. if that
Yes,
helps.
what I understand is that in our zoning concept scheme, which we originally were told was a very simple process, and that the original map, which you voted to, or approved, which showed our concept of what we thought would look like, actually turned into requiring the drainage concept. That's part of zoning concept. But apparently the drainage is going to be more or increased as perceived by the city engineer. The way it was explained to me is that what we were proposing caused more drainage and therefore required more detailed pond design rather than just, this is where we will put the ponds. They wanted more detail, and the city engineer required more detail, which then our Doucette came back and said, well, generally that's not what we provide, so it will take more time than just the zoning concept scheme, and that will cost more. And in order to keep the project moving forward and on track so that we could meet the deadlines, we kept this project moving, and so the cost was, I approved it and we moved it forward.
And again, to clarify, it's just at this point, it's still conceptual. So when we reach a point of actually taking extensive measurements and elevations and so forth, that, you know, it may shift at some point.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's
'Cause this is a change
clarify
order.
that it's not designing the pond from an elevation standpoint, it's knowing what the pond needs to be able to catch. So just for clarification and to kind of put some things into perspective, when the land use codes were done, you guys remember that we did a moratorium so that we could get the drainage taken care of. The requirements for the zoning concept scheme have been included in the drainage manual and the building Bastrop code since it was approved back in 2017, November of 2017. So it is not anything additional that anybody else is not doing. For those of you that recalled the 2 hours of our city council meeting last week on Farm Street Village, they were going for a zoning change. They too included drainage as a part of it. It's from the perspective of you wouldn't allow the zoning to change if you're not going to be able to handle the water. So you got to look at what's draining. You don't do the final design. You don't have to say what size the outlet pipe is. You do have to be able to know that on the piece of property that you have, you're going to be able to contain the drainage and not have an adverse impact to anybody that's downstream or flood any of your neighbors. That's a fundamental concept, and that's been the rule for everybody, and that's what all folks are expected to do when they go through the process. So I want to clarify, it's one thing to do the analysis of, from Mr. Gossett, to your point of elevations, you got to know what drains to the point, but that's different than actually designing the pond. But any of the requirements that are done as per the drainage manual, that's work that's then in place when you do go to design the actual pond. You now know what the runoff's going to be and how much of the area is going to drain. And I would offer that the city manager and the assistant city manager are here if we have any further questions about that. But I just wanted to clarify that the requirements are part of the drainage manual, and the checklist for the zoning concept scheme has been in place since the code was adopted.
I think that it was just a surprise it came in late. It was an additional request, and it seems like that would have been in the original request, but I can understand if the engineer went out there and he found something that he wasn't expecting, and then he came back and said, oh, by the way, we're going to need something else, then maybe that makes sense.
And I think in general, it's reasonable with, what has additionally been requested, and the additional items don't seem excessive, and, I think we should, the money has been spent, the engineering has happened. I don't think we would undo it. I think it puts us a step ahead in the next steps as we keep going forward. So from my point of view, I would say we would move ahead.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve resolution R2021-0017.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 3.4, discussion and possible action on funding a separate contract between the City of Bastrop and Bowman Consulting for general consulting services during construction of the River Loop sidewalk. Information for that is on page 26. Who's going to handle this one? Are you, Janor, or is Jean going to give us a lead in on this?
Actually, I think Jean will.
Good evening, Board. Yes, so we were contacted by the City of Bastrop to present this, this contract to you all for additional expenditure towards the trail project. I actually would like to, as you all know, many of you are aware of the trail project. I think Jen is probably the only one that probably is not overly aware of it, but it's a connecting where the sidewalk currently ends at Old Austin Highway, comes down south to Highway 71, loops back around to the new bridges that are going in on 71 across the river, and then goes down to Ferry Park, and then connects with where the new Main Street expansion project ends. So it will make a complete loop around not only the park area, but also the community back to downtown, connecting kind of the 71 corridor to downtown. The EDC had originally offered to fund the entire project. That was put in place in 2017. The city went after 2 grants and received 2 grants, one from CapCog and the other one from Keep Bastrop County Beautiful, and it was a governor's grant that we partnered with them on. And so the agreement was that the EDC would pay for all of the engineering, and the grants would pay for, per the structure of the grants, would pay for all of the construction, basically anything past the engineering point. So this was presented to us, and I would actually like Bowman Consulting, who is part of this contract, to come up and speak about what the contract means and what's being asked, and then for you all to decide if it's something you would like to participate in. Okay. Nick Keel with Bowman Consulting. And Mia.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us tonight, inviting us to present. So yeah, like Jean had described, we had a engineering design services contract in 2017, and then subsequently it got grant funded for the project, which is a good thing. In the original contract for 2017, there was a budget of 15 hours per week for 2 months for reviewing contractor submittals, product submittals, getting it underway, pre-construction meeting, basically that transition period time from design and permitting into construction. And then on-site observations, there's oftentimes requests for information from the contractor and interpretation of the plans, and then reviewing, monthly pay-apps, those type of things, and seeing the project through construction administration services. So we'd performed those 2 months of services. We got the project permitted. We reviewed all the contractor submittals and everything, and as you guys know, and you've seen it under construction here, it's well underway. So we've been supporting the project through administration. In August, we were directed that the city would be taking over our contract to see it through construction. So that 15 hours a week for 2 months was exhausted, and at that time, the contract would transition to the city. So in August, we wrote this proposal to provide the construction administration services for the duration of construction, and that includes the same services, the observations, coming on site, looking at things, problem-solving issues in the field as they arrive, making sure you have accessible slopes and handicap ramps, and then reviewing contractor pay applications, making sure they're in line with what's happening in the field, and then ultimately we'll be preparing record drawings and closing the project out with TxDOT when everything's all said and done. So that's the extent of the services that we have in the contract with the city.
Okay. And so, again, understanding the basis of the grants and the basis of the money that was used and spent by BEDC, BEDC was able to do the initial engineering work, and the grants are restricted specifically to construction because the grants themselves could not be used for the basic engineering work, the front-end engineering work. Is that, Gene, is that how those are set up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So once you go to construction phase, then you're on the grants, pretty much.
Correct.
Right.
That was our understanding, yes.
Okay. Okay. Understood.
What was the breakdown between the construction, engineering costs and the construction costs? I'm not-
So to date, the Bastrop EDC has expended $218,307.50 on this project, including the engineering and permitting fees. And then there you have a breakout of what's being asked for tonight.
Thank you.
And then the grants total $630,000, I believe?
605, I think.
605, sorry.
So is this construction or engineering?
Our contract, our proposal is for construction administration, so
Construction.
Yeah, I mean, when we've looked through.
engineering oversight.
Right, which happens at any project during construction.
Correct.
So, you know, from my point of view, and looking over the proposal is, you know, this request for additional money is clearly in the construction phase, and I don't believe the BEDC should be supporting further on this, essentially the grants. This falls clearly under the grants. In fact, you know, under the contract, it states Bowman will provide engineering support services to assist the city with construction administration during construction phase of the project. That's the first segment. The second section is that tasks includes assisting the contractor to resolve issues that may arise during construction, which is normal during construction phase, and periodically observing construction for the duration of the contract schedule and close out the project. The task includes delivery of record drawings, what we call red lines, or the final drawings, which is all standard steps for the construction phase of a project. So from my point of view, that there's not a sound basis for why BEDC would need to come up or provide more money. This should come straight out of the construction aspects of the grant, is my opinion based on this. I don't believe we should have a resolution to provide more funding at this point.
Go ahead.
Is there I know the grants for a particular amount. Have we exhausted that amount in construction side?
The city applied for those grants on the BEDC's behalf, I believe was the understanding at the time. And they are the administrator of the grants, so therefore you have to.
The city.
Yes.
Yep.
Just a clarification, so basically, the city of Bastrop is asking the EDC to fund this additional money to you guys, to Bowman, is that correct?
Well, actually, it appears.
I would defer to the city on
Right.
that, I'm not sure. I was just asked to present tonight.
I think from the data, it talks about the city is requesting the BEDC to add it to the budget of the city from funding from the BEDC to their budget in order for them to execute. But the contract is strictly between Bowman and the city of Bastrop, not between BEDC. The first contract was through BEDC. This extension is done through the city.
All right, and I'm just trying to clarify, who is it that's asking us for more money? Is it the city or is it Bowman?
It's the city.
Okay,
Yeah, the
So-
city has requested that.
okay, thank you.
Okay, Bill, did you want to make a motion?
Charlie, I don't know if it's a motion not to,
Just have to. Okay. But we would have to vote that that's the decision of the board.
So are we going to not finish the project?
oh, I haven't heard that we don't have money for the project. This was just a request to categorize engineering services into the BEDC. I haven't seen a request or anything. I think that was what Kevin's question was leading to.
Yeah, and because I didn't see what the bid was for the,
We haven't either because the bid was through the city, so.
I think the bid was through TxDOT, wasn't it? Did Bowman open the bids? What was the bid on the project?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, it was 565,000. I would have to verify that.
And it says on page 27 that BEDC has expended $218,347.50. Was that all engineering, or is that some construction as well?
That's the construction bid, correct? The 587,000.
No, but I'm asking the 218, is there a portion of that that's been construction, or is all of the funds expended all been engineering?
And permitting. Yes.
So you have $218,000 of engineering plus a $565,000 bid, means that you are at almost $800,000, and you got $605,000 worth of grants. So are we going to stop the project?
So I think the question is the bid for the actual construction is 587,000, is that what you said? I'm sorry? I don't recall off the top of, I think. 565.
That's what I wrote down, was 565.
And the city received $605,000 of grants for construction. The BEDC has funded all of the engineering separate from the grants. So that $218,347.50 all came directly out of our budget. It has nothing to do with the grants. And I think that was Kevin's question.
I was just trying to get to a total of the project, because your memo said that back in 2017, BEDC was planning on picking up the tab for everything because they didn't know that the grants were coming through.
That is
So
correct.
that's why I was trying to get back to a total
Yes, and
number.
if I remember correctly, I believe after it was announced that we received the grants, the BEDC reallocated that funding to something else.
That would be correct, yes.
So in summary, the 560, what you have written down?
565.
is to go against the 605. And so based on that, it should be more than adequate based on the way things are today, and there's no need for the BEDC to provide additional funding to achieve that.
And what's the total that's being asked for in this change? 32.
32,300.
So it's 47,000, so there's a shortage.
In the construction.
Yeah, if there's $605,000 worth of grant and $565,000 was the bid for construction, that leaves $40,000. And if this resolution's for $47,000,
If I could correct, the amount for construction is $596,545.70.
596.
596, correct.
So it almost used up the whole grant, is what we're saying. Pretty close, right?
Yeah, out of 605, yeah.
Then I would recommend that you go back and we do a review of the spending to date by the city on the project at 605 and begin looking at where things are and where it's happening, and not necessarily proceed with approving this additional engineering. It should be within the construction, and then at that point you can review why the construction is over budget according to the original.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the professional services included won't be covered by the TxDOT grant. That's why we're here tonight. Yes, it's additional professional services related to construction, but that's generally in every scope of work that's ever done. With engineering, you always take it to construction, to the bidding phase. You include a lot of that. Really what you have here is a gap in the scope that we're trying to fix tonight. You're overall getting a savings of about $340,000. You think about funding the original price. Does that make sense?
Would you like to maybe go into a
That
little
didn't
bit
make
more?
any sense.
Well, no,
Maybe
because
back me up.
he's saying in 2017, the BEDC was prepared to spend $680,000, and to date, you've spent $218,000.
Which is a savings of a little over $340,000.
Right, but right in 2000, after this was agreed and the grants were made, the money was not just held out there. That would have made a extensive project. So once the grants were achieved, the administration was put in the hands of the city based on those grants. Then at that point, the project manager is the city with Bowman.
All I can tell you is my understanding is that the grant dollars from TxDOT will not cover this expense because it's professional services. It was not included in the original scope, which I didn't have anything to do with the EDC did.
And there's two grants, and so it
correct.
can also apply to the other grant.
Which one's tax?
So, yep.
Sure.
So I would just like to kind of step back for a minute. So the BEDC approved the project in between 2016 and 2017 is when the discussions took place. There was no grant at that time when that project was approved, so of course we did not have that portion of the scope in there. It was a different project. It was going to be managed and built differently. When the city went after the grants, because of the types of grants, and this is not to complain, it changed the structure of the project. So I just want to make it clear that it's not that we didn't put them in there. It was a different project when we first started and approved it as a board and as an organization. So when the grants changed the scope of the project and the requirements for the project is when this portion of it happened. And so I just want everybody to be very clear that when our original professional services agreement did include everything that it needed to include to build the project at that time.
But if you went into construction, you would have had another.
Because Gene, I think in your staff report, you noted that some of the grants required additional permitting. So it was like we knew if you accept the grant, it's going to cost you more up front, but that's the penalty for accepting
Correct.
$605,000 worth of grants.
Correct, and none of those agreements were changed at the time.
They could have been, but they weren't.
Could have been, but we were never approached to do so. So here we are, and again, it's being presented to you as a board. Please ask any additional questions of the engineering firm and of city staff as to what you need to have the information you need.
But things like professional services could be applied to the Keep Bastrop County Beautiful grant.
My understanding we're here tonight is because it could not. The grant funding that we received could not cover the professional services, which is why Fabiola asked for the additional funding here. And you can certainly not do that, but that's why we're here.
So just trying to back up for a minute. This would be kind of like a change order that didn't come to us. Is that kind of how you would look at it, that we didn't know about this? It would have had to have come back before us for us to make some adjustments, since it was kind of a
I do believe it would
is
have
that kind of what
anyway.
I'm thinking?
Yes, I believe it would have anyway.
Well, I would think back in 2016, when we were talking about the River Loop project, nobody was talking about 9 bridges going across the Colorado River and doing it in coordination with a TxDOT contract and knowing how we were going to get up and down ADA, all the little ramps and all that extra stuff. And when you were originally scoping the project from a Bowman perspective, you weren't coordinating with 13 other contractors that were on not building 9 bridges. And so the 2 months was more than enough time if nobody else was involved. But with the, to Chairwoman Nash's comments, with the change, it's not going to be done in 2 months. And the draws, there's going to be more draws than what you anticipated. It's going to take additional time. To Gene's point of its grants that no one knew about from the beginning, and its construction scenario with TxDOT that no one, I don't think anybody in 2016 knew there were going to be 9 bridges under construction at the time that we were trying to build the loop.
That's fair.
Yeah, I was here when we initially, decided to do this project, and I mean, it certainly, and we also did know, I remember when the grants came through, that was going to mean there were going to be additional requirements to comply with the grants. So, I mean, we're talking about 37K. Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable overage for that amount of A, delay in, how long it took to get to this point, but B, with the additional requirements that we expected anyway.
So I have a question. So this is one request for additional funds. Is there any due diligence being done to see if there are other areas that were missed?
Yeah, so we've reviewed everything. Material testing was also added to this. It's the $15,000 you see there with MWM, and that includes the project management from MWM. And then your $32,395 is your engineering. That should be it. There is no additional staff cost. I see the question marks, but that's being inspected by city staff.
Ms. Wall, for clarification, since you weren't on the board back then, there were 2 change orders initially. I'm looking at one from 2018 for $6,000 and one from 2019 in the amount of $50,000.
So this would be.
Well,
And were those
weren't-
engineering, or was that, what were they?
The $50,000 was for TxDOT design and permitting criteria, and the $6,000 was for environmental permitting. And to answer your question, yes, those were change orders done under the original agreement with Bowman, but the agreement is now between the city of Bastrop and Bowman, which would explain why we didn't get this change order. It went to the city instead of the EDC.
All right.
And this is construction, not engineering, that you're asking for.
We are constructing the project, and the professional services are being provided.
So you're asking for construction.
So I know you're trying to separate the two, but there is an engineering component to the construction. He will go out and make engineering decisions on the job to make sure the grade is correct and things of that nature. What we're asking you today is to change this and approve this change order so that you can continue the project. That's the hopes. It was a good project in 2016. We're hoping it's still a good project today. If not, I'm sure we'll figure it out, but that's the request.
And are you saying you've already gone over your grant amount?
I'm saying the grant won't cover professional services. It only covers construction of the contractor.
Is it possible to get a review of the grant, especially the Chamber of Commerce grant, to see whether it does or does not apply to?
Did you mean the Campo grant or
No,
the
the other one.
Keep Bastrop County Beautiful?
Right. Campo, I think, from a metropolitan standpoint.
I have Campo here. I don't have the other one.
Okay.
I very much appreciate the question, but that's still there's not enough money, right? It's still 596 versus 605.
Well, if we're over budget, then I would, definitely like to see a formal presentation on where the money's gone, how it got used, and how we're at the point of over budget, as well as a concise action plan on how to bring it in budget and what it would take to bring the project in budget. I mean, usually in any project I've worked on around the world, my first step is not where I get more money. The first step is I have to exhaust every path that I have in order to bring it back in budget first. So, you know, I'd really like to see where we are before we approve more money on something that we're not sure where the budget overall is.
And administratively, could I have a total on all of that? We weren't clear from the email exactly what the total was. I see 32,395. I'm sorry. Who's answering you?
Yeah.
32,395 plus $15,000 plus.
There is no additional city.
There was no additional. Okay.
But again, going in the letter, and I'm going to quote the letter. The city is asking the BEDC to fund these additional services and any additional services that may be required until the closeout of the project due to unforeseen circumstances and market activity. So what that says in the email to me is that it's this amount and whatever else is going to come up that we don't know about. And if we're that far in construction, we better know already where we're going to be and where we're going to end up and why we are where we are in terms of an over-budget project. The project is over budget, correct, at this point? Or in your projection, it is an over budget?
It will be, yeah, for the additional engineering.
Okay, I would definitely, no, overall, the overall project is over budget.
We have not exhausted all the grant funding yet, if that's what you're asking.
Your projection is that it will be over budget?
I do believe it will be with this additional cost.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see a full,
And I honestly, I wouldn't, I know for MWM to decide, I'm pretty certain that's not going to move. I can't speak for Bowman, but they're certainly here. I'm sure that's how it was represented originally, that it wouldn't change.
Is the testing required from a city standpoint, or is that a Campo part of their
There are some
permitting
standard
process?
testing requirements for TxDOT. Again, this is just,
So if
it's
testing's required
$37,000.
by TxDOT and Campo, and testing's not budgeted,
Yeah, it's a yes or no, it's okay.
I have a couple of points to add, if I could. So we placed due to the nature of the project with the way it was initially conceived as a kind of a design build, field engineered project, we placed a $75,000 contingency in the contract. So we're holding that and we're using it as unforeseen items come up. One, for example, was the initial section here on Water Street. When one prior project, the city road widening overlapped with the sidewalk as it was designed, we went and field engineered and changed some things. We improved drainage, we added curb and gutter, and we really improved that whole first section. So we spent some of the 75, not all of it. I believe we have about a $30,000 to $35,000 contingency remaining. So as the project progresses and those unforeseen items come up, we'll continue to use that. But that's one thing that we did, which I think was smart in the project, and to try not to come back for any more money. The other point I'd like to add is that that $32,395 is a budget estimate, just an hourly buildup. Our services were proposed to be hourly as needed, and so if we're not called out, or if we can do stuff, via video conference like we just did with the Director of Public Works the other day. We ran into a project over there by the park. The contractor was having trouble getting the grades to line up and be accessible, and I didn't actually have to go out to the site. I video conferenced with Mia, and so we were able to, save cost there. So that's an hourly budget, and, to the extent we can get it done as efficient and effectively as we can, we'll absolutely do our best to limit our...
Is there a reason that can't come out of the contingency?
No, well, let me think about that. Yeah, the contract right now has that between the city and the general contractor. I guess if it's a savings later, I mean, our services are invoiced monthly as they're accrued. That contract will have that budget remaining until everything's closed out and done. I'm not sure how the finances exactly work with that, but from the city's perspective, I think it, could be all one budget. I'd have to think about that more, though.
So, excellent question. I think that's what we're looking for in terms of a successful project management, is that we actually go through this. If we see a project going over budget, then you kind of step into crisis mode and find out what bucket your money is and where it needs to be allocated and where you can allocate it before you're just asking for more money. So, I would say that some deeper dive by the city on what can, and find out the interpretation of what can be used for the build, what was it, Bastrop, better, the Chamber of Commerce one. Maximize that as best we can.
It's not the chamber.
Is it?
Keep Bastrop County beautiful.
Keep Bastrop County beautiful. I wouldn't say build back better, that's something else, but keep, exactly. But go back on that, let's see what we can, maximize that one in terms of the categories, and it includes reallocating monies that had gone into that could be reallocated to the compo one, could then free up space on that grant to achieve. So I think a better overall view, including all known contingencies, should be broadcast on the table and presented in a formal report to the BEDC before approval by the city.
Any other comments?
Is there a possibility that we're going to hear sometime in the future that if we don't move on this quickly, that there's going to be cost associated with it because work is not getting done, whether it is engineering or construction?
I would think at this point, between what Bowman presented in regards to some contingency funds and staff and the engineering firm, let us kind of go back, reevaluate kind of where that all is, look at the grants, see where those all are and how those are allocated. And what we may be able to do is come up with a way to offset some of that that's already existing. And then if we can't get to that, then I think at that point, myself, Mr. Job, and Bowman could come back with you with some potential solutions.
Can that be achieved by the January meeting, the next meeting?
By our January meeting? I would hope so, yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to put an agenda item for that January meeting for this.
That would be January 24th, just for the boards.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so we will take no action on 3.4.
Thank you all.
Thank you. 3.5, discussion and possible action on the amended performance agreement with Mocha Ventures Nebraska, LLC.
Okay, so just the amendments that are proposed or in the agreement are increased acreage, and actually I believe Mocha's pro rata share of the infrastructure, which would be 50% of the distance of the infrastructure improvements to their property. And the language we used was not to exceed $500,000, and we did speak with Mocha, and they were fine and comfortable with that language. And then also to grant an access easement to Mocha, a temporary access easement. Let me qualify that.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. We've talked about these three items before. This is, the $500,000 will cover to the entrance. I understand there was a bit of exceeding the 1 million.
Yes.
And so, we talked about taking it up to the ravine. Do we want to even think about where that entrance is? It's how many feet is that entrance?
What they have estimated to us, and we do not have the engineering on it from Mocha, however, what they have estimated to us is 400 linear feet.
Okay,
From,
that's not very far.
once you've crossed over the gas line, south on Jackson Street, and then turn east on the street that is yet to be named.
Okay.
And the 400 feet is defined or is in the agreement?
It's actually in the agreement that the reimbursement costs at the end of the project, or that their pro rata share will not exceed $500,000,
Based on their 400-foot,
based on their 400
Right.
estimate, yes.
and based on their 400-foot is in the agreement.
Angela, is that in there?
Just to make sure that they don't come back and state a 600, or do we have a document that classifies their requested entrance at 400 feet?
That was the wording that I sent, Allison is the
Right.
attorney.
The 400.
And yes, it absolutely should be in there.
Yep, okay, that's what I want to make sure, because I didn't want them to come back and say
Yeah, I wanna
600 or 800 feet and still.
Page
Correct.
4 of the contract says approximately 350 feet.
That's fine. So
Correct.
the proximity is good enough.
Well, it says approximately 350 feet adjoined by a public roadway extending another 400 feet. So it's 750 feet.
So the answer, Mr. Gossett, is yes, it's in their contract, or the performance agreement.
And also the acreage increase, that was the amount of acreage that was a consequence of the
There was a survey done in 1940,
of the
and,
power lines being
In the wrong
4 or 5
location.
feet further
Correct.
over than it was, so
Yep.
it just made, that they have more land. Okay. So they're not asking for any additional land, it's just
No.
a consequence of that difference in placement of the power lines.
correct.
Any additional questions on the Mocha agreement? Well, is this the final piece for them to proceed with the purchase of the land?
Yes, I believe it is.
Gotcha. Okay, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to authorize the executive director to execute the amended performance agreement with Mocha Ventures, including an access easement, agenda item 3.5.
Second?
All those in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've come to the end. I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn?
Do I have a second? So everybody have a safe and joyful holiday season, and we are adjourned. It is 6:23.